What lifestyle is normal for you, but may be condemned by others? I've always known my internal clock runs on a different operating system. While most people seem to wake up sharp, energized, ready to conquer the day before their second cup of coffee, my brain spends the entire morning buffering. I'm technically awake, but not fully online. Thoughts move slowly. Focus slips through my fingers. Anything that requires structure, decision-making, or productivity feels oddly heavy, like trying to think through fog. And it's not laziness. It's not a lack of ambition or discipline. It's more like my mind just isn't meant to be rushed into usefulness at sunrise. During the day, what I crave isn't output, it's presence. I want to exist quietly, to walk without a destination, to sit in the sun and let it warm my face, to notice the way the air feels, the sound of birds, the rhythm of the world moving without me needing to keep up. I can drink coffee slowly, listen to music, let my thoughts drift where they want to go instead of forcing them into boxes. That's when I feel calm, grounded, human. But then the sun starts to set. Somewhere between late afternoon and early evening, something inside me clicks into place. It's subtle, but unmistakable, like someone finally turned the lights on. My thoughts sharpen. My motivation wakes up. Ideas start forming without effort. Tasks that felt unbearable a few hours ago suddenly feel doable, sometimes even enjoyable. Between about 5 p.m. and 2 a.m., I'm fully myself. That's when I clean, organize, work, plan, and actually finish things. I don't rush. I don't resent the process. I move with intention instead of resistance. My house ends up clean. My work gets done properly. My mind feels clear instead of strained. I'm not less productive than everyone else. I'm just productive in reverse. While others are winding down, I'm ramping up. While the world is getting quieter, my focus gets louder. And oddly enough, that balance lets me enjoy the daytime instead of spending it exhausted, irritated, or constantly feeling behind. Of course, none of this fits neatly into the schedule society decided was normal. People love to comment on it. Why don't you answer earlier? Are you still sleeping? Must be nice to wake up so late. The reality is simple. You're probably not going to get a thoughtful response from me before 10:00 a.m. Not because I don't care, but because that's not when I function well. That's not when I do my best thinking. And forcing myself to pretend otherwise only makes everything harder for everyone involved. For a long time, I tried to fight this. I forced early mornings. I shamed myself for not being on at the right hours. I measured my worth against a clock that was never designed for me, and all it did was make me tired, frustrated, and constantly feeling like I was failing at something invisible. Once I stopped fighting my natural rhythm and started working with it instead, everything softened. My life got calmer. My space stayed cleaner. My energy stopped feeling borrowed. It might look backwards to other people, but for me, it finally feels aligned. And that's worth more than meeting someone else's idea of what a productive day is supposed to look like. Once a month, I go to the grocery store. Not every week. Not on impulse. Not because I suddenly realized I'm out of something at 9 p.m. and panic bought half the aisle. Just once a month, deliberately, calmly, and with a very clear plan. I already know what I'm there for before I walk in. I usually pick 1 or 2 items I use constantly. Real staples, the kind of things that quietly anchor my meals. Nothing trendy, nothing exciting, just food I know I'll actually eat. And then I buy those things in bulk. Not reality TV prepper bulk. Not pallets and industrial shelving. Just practical amounts. 30 or 40 cans of one thing, a few bags of another. Enough to matter. Enough to last. Enough to make future me's life a little easier. From the outside, though, it probably looks odd. 1 month my cart might have 4 cans of diced tomatoes, 4 cans of peas, 35 cans of green beans, and maybe 3 cans of baked beans tossed in like a concession to variety. The next month? Totally different vibe. A completely normal-looking cart. Until you notice 38 boxes of elbow macaroni stacked so neatly it almost looks intentional. Which it is. Over time, it balances out. It always does. But strangers never see the long view. They only ever see a snapshot, one weird moment frozen in time, and that's all it takes for them to form an opinion. And they always have something to say. The looks come first, a pause, a double take, a little smirk. Then the comment. Wow, you really like green beans, followed by that same recycled laugh, like they're the first human being to ever notice a pattern in someone else's groceries. It shouldn't bother me. Logically, I know that. I don't owe anyone an explanation for what's in my cart. I'm not inconveniencing them. I'm not doing anything wrong. And yet, it irritates me every single time. Because there's something deeply uncomfortable about being silently judged for something so ordinary. Something about feeling like you're being evaluated, categorized, reduced to a joke in someone else's head over something as basic as food. That's why I go at 6:00 a.m., early enough that the store is still half asleep. The aisles are quiet. The lights are softer somehow. The only other people there are workers stocking shelves and a few fellow early morning ghosts who just want to get in and get out. No commentary. No jokes. No one tracking what I put into my cart. I can move at my own pace. I can think. I can breathe. What could be annoying or overstimulating becomes almost meditative, just the steady rhythm of choosing what I need and leaving. Doing it this way has let me build a genuinely solid pantry over time, without ever dropping a massive amount of money all at once. I'm not panic buying. I'm not reacting to headlines. I'm not wiping shelves clean. I'm just being consistent, quietly, patiently, month after month. And the result matters more than most people realize. If grocery stores stopped being an option tomorrow, if something unexpected happened, and suddenly they just weren't there, I could keep eating the way I do now for roughly 10 months before I'd actually run out of food. That number isn't an accident. And it's not paranoia. It's where I ended up by being intentional. There's a reason for that. When I finally stopped being unhoused, I made myself a promise. Not a vague goal, not a hopeful thought, but a real, unbreakable promise. I told myself that I would never be without food again. Ever. Hunger does something to you. It rewires how you think. Once you've lived with that kind of uncertainty, having enough stops feeling excessive or indulgent. It stops being about abundance. It becomes about safety. Freezing leftovers stretches that safety even further. One extra portion today becomes a gift to a future version of me, the one who's exhausted, broke, overwhelmed, or just needs one less decision to make. Nothing goes to waste unless it absolutely has to. Sometimes people assume I'm some kind of hardcore prepper. They picture bunkers, generators, worst-case scenarios looping endlessly in my head. But that's not me. There's no bunker, no doomsday clock, no obsession with collapse. I'm just a normal person who wants to know, really know, that I can always put food on the table. And for me, that quiet kind of preparedness has nothing to do with fear. It's about peace. My main source of income while I was in school wasn't an internship. It wasn't something impressive sounding. It wasn't the kind of job you casually drop into conversation to earn nods of approval. It was a warehouse, steel shelves, concrete floors, repetitive physical work. The kind of job people mentally tune out of when they ask, "So what do you do?" Because they were hoping for a different answer. I worked from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m., 5 days a week. And honestly, it was perfect. That schedule fit my life better than any normal job ever could. I woke up at 1:15 in the morning, when the world was still dark and silent, dragged myself into clothes, and stepped outside while everyone else was still asleep. No traffic, no noise, just me and the quiet. By the time most people were hitting snooze on their alarms, I was already halfway done with my workday. By sunrise, I'd already earned my money. The best part was the freedom it gave me. I had my days back, If my friends wanted to grab lunch, run errands, or do something spontaneous, I was usually free. I didn't have to say, "Sorry, I work." I'd already worked, while they were sleeping. But apparently, that didn't count. Because wow, were people judgmental about it. You go to bed at 8 p.m.? You act like you've had such a long day. Why are you always tired? And every single time, I wanted to scream. Because yes, I did have a long day, Cheryl. You just weren't awake for the first half of it. Let me spell it out. I woke up at 1:15 a.m. Not 7, not 9. 1:15. I worked a physically demanding job until 8:00 a.m. On my feet, lifting, moving, repeating the same motions over and over. Then I went straight into a full day of classes that ran until around 5:00 p.m. After that, errands, appointments, groceries, homework, life, all the same things everyone else does, just stacked on top of a day that started before most people even opened their eyes. So when I said I was exhausted, I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't playing tired. I was tired because my day had already lived a whole life before yours even began. What really got to me was how invisible that effort felt to other people. If you're tired from a desk job, that makes sense. If you're tired from studying late, people sympathize. But part-time work, blue-collar work, night shift work, somehow that doesn't register the same way. There's this unspoken rule that if your exhaustion doesn't look familiar, it doesn't count. If it doesn't fit into a neat, socially approved schedule, people treat it like a personal flaw instead of a reality. And people can be absolute assholes about it. They hear part-time and think easy. They hear night shift and think lazy during the day. They don't see the discipline it takes to flip your entire life upside down just to make everything work. They don't see the alarms going off in the dead of night. They don't feel the physical strain or the mental exhaustion of constantly operating out of sync with the rest of the world. They just see someone yawning at 3 p.m. and decide that must mean you're doing something wrong. But the work is real. The exhaustion is real. And the effort absolutely counts, even if it happens while everyone else is asleep. There's one phrase that instantly makes my jaw clench. You don't want to depend on a pill. Every time I hear it, something in me snaps just a little. Not enough to explode, just enough to feel that familiar, quiet anger settle in my chest. Now, let me be clear. If someone personally doesn't want to take medication, that's completely fine. Genuinely. Your body, your brain, your choice. No argument there. But that's almost never what people actually mean when they say this. What they're really doing is loading the word dependence with shame and then casually aiming it at someone else, like it's some kind of warning label. Like they're saying, be careful, you don't want to become that kind of person. And I always want to ask, what do you even mean by that? Because if we're going to talk about dependency, then let's actually talk about it honestly, without pretending we're all rugged little survivalists out here raw-dogging existence. I am dependent on my toothbrush. If I suddenly lost access to it, my health would absolutely suffer. I'm dependent on the blanket on my bed. And no, sleeping without one is not some noble test of character. It just sucks. I'm dependent on my phone, not even for scrolling, but for alarms, emergency calls, navigation, banking, work, and basic participation in modern life. I'm dependent on electricity, on clean running water, on my washing machine, on refrigeration. And so are you. We are all deeply, profoundly dependent on tools, systems, and supports that make our lives function. Remove enough of them, and everything falls apart very quickly. That's not weakness, that's civilization. That's the entire point of progress. But somehow, when the tool happens to be medication, suddenly it turns into a moral issue. Suddenly it's, well, I don't want to rely on that. As if everyone else is out here surviving purely on willpower, grit, and positive affirmations. What drives me absolutely insane is the selective logic. No one says, aren't you worried about depending on your glasses? No one side-eyes someone for needing a hearing aid. No one gives a smug little lecture about how insulin is a crutch, at least not in polite company. No one pats themselves on the back for enduring allergy season without antihistamines like it's some kind of character-building exercise. But mental health meds? Pain management? Anything that touches the brain, the nervous system, or emotional regulation? That's where the judgment creeps in. And let's be honest, a lot of the time, it's not concern. It's comparison. It's a quiet way of saying, I'm stronger than you, or I'm doing this the right way, or if I can suffer through it, you should too. Sometimes that judgment gets projected outward. Other times, it gets turned inward. People repeat it to themselves because it makes them feel safer, more disciplined, more in control, because admitting that everyone relies on support, including them, can be uncomfortable. So instead, we invent this imaginary category of dependency that supposedly makes someone lesser. But that category doesn't actually exist. Needing something that improves your quality of life does not make you weak. It makes you human. We've been inventing tools, treatments, and systems for thousands of years for one very simple reason. Suffering unnecessarily is not a virtue. Pain is not proof of strength. Struggle is not a moral achievement. And framing medication as a failure, a shortcut, or some kind of personal flaw doesn't help anyone. It just creates shame. It keeps people quiet. It convinces people to white-knuckle their way through life when they don't have to. Also, someone else can feel a little more together by comparison. So no, I'm not ashamed of depending on a pill. I already depend on half the objects in my house to function like a normal human being in modern society. Medication just happens to be one of the tools that actually works for me. The only real difference is which dependencies society decided to judge. And honestly, I'm done pretending that distinction makes any sense at all. One of my favorite things about living alone happens in a very specific moment. I come home, I close the door, I lock it behind me, and then I don't have to say a single word to anyone. No small talk, no explanations, no "how was your day?" delivered out of politeness instead of curiosity. Nothing. That silence belongs to me. It's the moment my shoulders finally drop, the moment my jaw unclenches, the moment my nervous system realizes it's safe to stand down for a while. I can take a breath without bracing for the next interaction. I can just exist, without performing, without reacting, without being needed. And I don't think people realize how rare that kind of quiet actually is. Most days I spend hours interacting with people non-stop. Conversations layered on conversations, reading tone, managing emotions, theirs and mine, answering questions, being attentive, being polite, being on. Even when those interactions are positive, they still cost energy. By the time I'm done, some days there's just nothing left in the tank. No extra patience, no spare words, no emotional bandwidth to give. And that's before we even talk about chronic illness. I live with a few conditions that quietly drain energy in the background, even on my best days. It's like starting every morning with a phone battery that's already at 60%. Sometimes 50, sometimes less. You can still function, but you have to be careful how fast you burn through it. Which means every once in a while, I need a weekend where I do absolutely nothing. Not socializing, not catching up, not being productive in a way that looks impressive from the outside. Just rest. Because when I push myself too hard for too long, I don't get rewarded for it. I don't build resilience. I don't magically power through. I get punished. I end up in a flare. And then I can't do anything at all for much longer than if I had just stopped earlier. It's not dramatic. It's not laziness. It's basic damage control. And yet I still find myself having to explain this, over and over. Sometimes, when I'm in a flare, I don't even have the energy to text back. Not because I don't care. Not because I'm upset. But because my brain is so overwhelmed or exhausted that forming a coherent sentence feels impossible. Even reading messages can feel like too much input. So I go quiet. And apparently that makes people uncomfortable. I think part of the issue is this unspoken belief that because we can contact each other at any time, we should. That availability equals obligation. That instant access means instant response. That if you don't reply quickly, you're somehow doing something wrong. But not everyone is built to be reachable 24/7. My phone goes on Do Not Disturb every night. Every single night. I won't see messages until morning unless I actively check. That's not an accident. That's intentional. That's a boundary. And no, it's not an emergency just because it feels urgent to someone else. Some of us need space to stay functional. Some of us need silence to recover. Some of us need to disappear for a bit so we don't completely burn out. But for a lot of people, that idea seems almost alien. As if peace is suspicious. As if rest has to be justified. As if constant access to another human being is some kind of right. It isn't. Wanting quiet doesn't mean I don't care. Going offline doesn't mean I'm rejecting anyone. It just means I'm protecting what little energy I have so that when I do show up again, I'm actually present, not hollowed out, not running on fumes. Some of us just want a little damn peace for a while. And honestly, that really shouldn't be so hard to understand. I've always kept an essential vehicle maintenance and emergency kit in my car. Always. Not because I'm dramatic, but because cars have a nasty habit of breaking down at the worst possible times. And shockingly, I don't enjoy being stranded on the side of the road, cold, hungry, and relying on hope as a strategy. And yes, I've used that kit. Many times. Dead batteries, flat tires, random roadside emergencies that somehow only ever seem to happen to people who didn't plan ahead. Funny how that works. When I lived on the West Coast, I took it a step further. I kept a tsunami and wildfire evacuation kit in my car. Not hidden. Not secret. Just there. A bag I could grab in seconds and carry on foot if I had to. Water. Supplies. Essentials. The boring stuff that suddenly becomes priceless when everything around you is either on fire or underwater. Radical concept. I also put together a pet evacuation bag for my roommate's cat. Not even my cat. His. Food. Meds. A litter solution. Comfort items. Enough to get that little guy through at least a week in a shelter. Because in an evacuation, you really don't want to be standing there thinking, I guess we'll just wing it. Apparently, this made me insane. People treated me like I was a doomsday lunatic, like I was 2 steps away from building a bunker and screaming about the end times. I got jokes, eye rolls, comments like, "Wow, planning much?" You know that's probably never going to happen, right? Yes, I know. That's the point. Preparedness isn't about believing disaster is guaranteed. It's about understanding that if it does happen, it won't send you a calendar invite first. Emergencies don't wait until it's convenient or socially acceptable to be ready. But people don't like that reminder, because being prepared quietly highlights how unprepared they are. And instead of fixing that, it's much easier to mock the person who already did the work. I used to half-jokingly wish that one of those disasters would happen. Just once. Not because I wanted anyone hurt, but because I wanted that moment. The moment where the jokes stopped. Where the same people who laughed would be standing there empty-handed, panicked, and suddenly very interested in my ridiculous bag. Petty? Maybe. But also deeply human. The funny thing is, none of what I did was extreme. I wasn't hoarding. I wasn't fear-mongering. I wasn't living in constant dread. I was just acknowledging reality. Cars break down, fires happen, floods happen, evacuations happen, and animals don't magically pack their own supplies. Planning for that doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you responsible. So no, I'm not embarrassed about being that person. I'll take the jokes. I'll take the eye rolls. Because when something goes wrong, and something always does, eventually, I won't be standing there helpless, waiting for someone else to save me. I'll already be ready. And honestly, that peace of mind is worth every single laugh they threw my way. I like whiskey. I genuinely do. I enjoy the taste, the ritual, the slow appreciation of it. But here's the part that seems to short-circuit people's brains. I almost never drink. Maybe once or twice a year. And even then, it's one drink. One. In a social setting. That's it. You'd think I just announced I survive exclusively on rainwater and vibes. The peer pressure to drink, especially in the business world, is unreal. Work events, conferences, networking dinners, alcohol isn't treated like an option. It's treated like a requirement, like fun itself is locked behind a glass, and without it, you're somehow doing the whole thing wrong. It genuinely amazes me how many people act like they cannot experience joy unless they're at least mildly wasted. And if they want to do that, fine. Truly. I did my share in my early 20s. I've closed bars. I've made questionable decisions. I learned those lessons the traditional way. No judgment there. But at some point, the cost-benefit analysis changes. Now, when I'm at a work event and someone asks why I'm not drinking, and they always ask, what they're really saying is, why aren't you participating in the ritual the way we expect you to? Because apparently I don't feel like it is not an acceptable answer. There's always that pause. Then the jokes. Come on, just one. Live a little. You're really not drinking? Said in the same tone people use when you admit to tax fraud. And I'm standing there thinking, I am living. I'm just doing it without sacrificing my next 2 days. Because here's the thing. I don't enjoy being hungover. I don't enjoy the foggy, dehydrated, slightly nauseous aftermath that lingers long after the party ends. I don't enjoy dragging myself into meetings pretending I'm functional when I know I'm not at my best, especially when those meetings require clarity, focus, and competence. Somehow, choosing to feel good the next day gets framed as boring, or uptight, or antisocial, as if moderation is a personality flaw. What really gets me is how uncomfortable it makes people. My not drinking becomes a mirror they didn't ask for, and instead of just letting it exist, they feel the need to explain it, justify it, or challenge it, like my untouched glass is silently judging them. It isn't. I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm anti-feeling like crap for no reason. So yes, I'll sip my whiskey once in a blue moon. I'll enjoy it. I'll be present. I'll remember the conversations. And I'll wake up the next morning feeling fine, which, in my book, is a wildly underrated luxury. And honestly, if the only way to make a work event bearable is to be drunk, maybe the problem isn't the person holding the water,